Hey there! This is technically part 2 of my review series on the Pikmin franchise. You can definitely start here, but if you want to know what Pikmas is all about and hear what I had to say on the game that started it all, you can check that out right here or in the link in the description. Man, that cookbook was right. This does taste like chicken. Alright, Hyder, I'm heading to bed. Thanks again for getting the house decorated so nicely. Tomorrow morning, I'm gonna get up bright and early and I'm gonna make you a big Kapide-style breakfast. And then we can play Pikmin 4 together. Merry Pikmas! Man, I don't think I slept enough. Definitely not. It's still dark, and my ankles feel so heavy. I don't think I wore chains to bed. Hyder, you here? Oh great, at least we're here together. Quick question, where's here? Oh my god, no. This can't be happening. I tried so hard to get ready for today. Why is he here? He's had many names in Pikmas legend. Collect Blue Pict, Pell's Poco, Cloudorb, but most nowadays know him as one demon in particular, Loupus. Loupus comes for people who don't have enough Pikmas cheer and punishes them with his most twisted games. Trust me, Hyder, you never, ever want Loupus. Mr. Loupus, we're really sorry we didn't meet your standards this Pikmas Eve. We'll do whatever it takes to go home, though. Please, just be Ow! Pikmin 2? This is his twisted game? But... No, please, anything but this. But I suppose I don't have a choice, do I? Alright, let's get this show on the seat. Stars, yeah, sorry. The original Pikmin was a big success in the early stages of the Nintendo GameCube's life. An original IP near the launch of the system with a unique playstyle, impressive graphics for the time, and to top it all off, that ended up selling well over 1 million units worldwide. This may sound paltry nowadays, but when you consider the GameCube was unfortunately a flop in the long run, Pikmin 1 ended up as the 16th best-selling game on the whole system. Hell, if you ignore all the games that were parts of established Nintendo franchises by that point, you know, your Marios, Pokemon, Metroid, Pikmin was only behind Animal Crossing and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. For being a new face, the middle-aged space courier Castaway found himself in the limelight incredibly fast. And as such, with any success, you'd expect the sequel to have been greenlit not long after, right? Well, close! It was greenlit before all that. Yeah, Pikmin 2's development began immediately once the first game wrapped. Originally, Shigeru Miyamoto came to series director Shigefumi Hino and asked him to get a sequel out a year after the first. This must have been met with a pretty resounding no, because this eventually became a much longer development period. As such, Pikmin 2 released almost exactly 2.5 years later on April 29th, 2004. Is this necessary right now? I mean, I guess not, but maybe Loupus will let us off for having some cool Pikmin 2 development info. Where'd he go? Yeah, that's about all I've got for development history on this game. Other than a hilariously bad E3 trailer where they mostly just show Pikmin dying for a minute straight, things were pretty tight-lipped with this game. In comparison to the first Pikmin, there was no big development shift that changed the underlying concept. There was only a metaphorical god this time around, not a literal one. Instead, the biggest shift seems to have been a desire for co-op play. This wouldn't come to pass for the main story, however it did bring about one of the biggest innovations of this installment, being 2 captains in comparison to the original's 1. Pikmin 2 served as yet another success in the series, once again selling over 1 million units and garnering critical acclaim. However, the perception of this game in comparison to the first seems to be much more divisive nowadays. How could that be? Well, strap on your spacesuit and get ready for a new day. It's time to dive in. Our story begins immediately where Pikmin 1 ends. The happy end, that is. Loupus didn't spring for the cool version. Olimar, having successfully retrieved all of his ship parts, returns home to Hokotade and reports to his boss, President Chacho of Hokotade Freight. However, not all is well, as in the month we've been gone, the company has gone into massive debt. This means everything with any value is being repossessed, including my ship? Hey, I just spent 2 weeks getting that thing back together. My piggy bank was on there, dick. Okay, well, the SS Dolphin is gone. Olimar's life savings were stolen by a far more powerful force this time, and we're still 10,000 Pokos in debt. It frankly seems completely hopeless until this bottle cap Olimar brought home with him gets picked up by the only ship left, which announces it's worth huge money. The president, realizing that wherever Olimar was is a great source of valuables to the people of Hokatare, immediately sends him back to the planet to collect anything of worth he can find. Oh, and our coworker Louis over there is coming to help too, I guess. Weird guy. Eyes bug out of his head a lot. And so, without even getting to see his wife and kids, Olimar sets off with that blue dude back to the planet that nearly took his life in order to bail his company out of debt. Olimar, seriously? How are you so bad at flying these things? Do you fly with your eyes closed? Is that why you got hit by a meteor? Okay, well, Louie's missing, but I guess we landed well enough besides that. Time to whip out that captain's log and Yep, say hello to the main voice this go around, your ship. The Hokatare ship will chime in throughout the game in lieu of Olimar's interjections from the first. They serve basically the same purpose, and in the case of your first day, the ship will do everything it can to get you into tip-top shape. The game controls basically identically to the first, rounding up Pikmin with B, throwing them with A, using the C-stick to swarm the Pikmin, you know, your basics. Except that I lied to you. Surprise! This is the new play control version of Pikmin 2 for the Wii, and this is the best control scheme in the entire series. When you're playing Pikmin 1 on the GameCube, you'll notice that aiming your tosses can be a little harrowing. This is because your cursor generally tends to follow around where Olimar is facing as you move. So if you try to adjust him out of harm's way, your tosses will go entirely in the wrong direction. Not so with the advent of the greatest thing in the series, pointer controls. The precision of using a Wii remote to point where you want to throw your Pikmin while being able to move independently is a godsend. Beyond the benefits of pointer control, you can also now just swap between Pikmin types on the fly with the D-pad, which is huge for fighting enemies that have certain elemental properties. You also get the benefit of widescreen, which isn't present in the GameCube versions of either 1 or 2. I feel like most people will recommend that if you play the first two games, you should play them on at least the Wii, although certainly the Switch version of these two have pointer controls as well. This isn't to say the GameCube version is bad if you can't get your hands on a newer version, it's just that it's hard to go back after experiencing the bliss of pointer controls. It's just perfect for the series. One Bulborb later and we get met with another obstacle that impedes our progress. A paper bag. We're actually stuck here. The onion isn't around, so we can't sprout more, and even if we did, we need 15 in total, and that one bug ain't gonna get us to where we need to be. God, if only there was someone with us to help. Oh hey, Louie's up! With Louie up and at him, we get the rest of the basic Pikmin spiel. Louie learns all about Pikmin. Plucking them, growing them, getting mauled by them, all that good stuff. Once he's done farming, we also wander upon the first treasure of our expedition. But there is a problem, of course. We're disconnected from the ship, and taking it to the onion would surely only grow more Pikmin. God, if only there was someone with us to help. Oh wait, we're the help! A flattened paper bag later and we're digging that thing up and escorting it back to the ship. Get used to that sound, we're gonna be hearing a lot more of it. Despite the fact that we've barely done anything, our ship is a scaredy cat and decides we're heading up to orbit for the night. We then immediately return back to the Valley of Repose to pick up where we left off. There's clearly a lot more to this area after all. We knock down another paper bag, and for our troubles we get to beat up a spotty Bulborb and add a second treasure to our collection. Meanwhile, during that expedition, Olimar sent a group off to break down a wall nearby. Beyond this wall seems to be a dead end though. There's just too much water here for our Reds to accomplish anything. Although, this hole in the ground is awfully glowy. Warm air? I mean, I guess it is kinda cold. Ah, screw it, let's check it out. And here is where we get to see Pikmin 2's real big innovation, caves. We'll dig much deeper on the topic as we go on, but for simplicity's sake, think of caves like they're something akin to roguelite dungeons. Each one will see you go through a set number of floors collecting treasures and killing enemies, often culminating in a boss fight that rewards you with a permanent upgrade. The Emergence Cave isn't quite that extreme, however. For now, we have a pretty comfortable task on the first floor with a few snow bulborbs and a couple treasures to collect, followed by one more that features this behemoth of an item. And wouldn't you know it, collecting this unlocks another area to check out. We're finally in business. Let me just... huh? 101? But I can't go that high. The captains don't help with lifting, and Pikmin 2 retains the original's cap of 100 Pikmin at any given time. How do we get this back to the ship? Not even 100 men could... plants? They look like candy pop buds, but I've never seen them like this. And according to the ship, the Pikmin want to be tossed into them too. Well damn, that seed sprouted up quickly, but having my Pikmin back would be nice. Purples were next. Here's where we hit our next twist on the formula: new Pikmin types. Purples are slow, tubby little dudes, but they make up for it by having the strength of 10 of any other type. They're also my personal favorite type in the whole series, but we'll touch on that more later. For now, that's good enough to get that treasure back to the ship to enjoy the real reward, leaving with our new purple friends in tow. With that, we've successfully completed the tutorial and opened up the next area, the Awakening Wood. And now let me be the first to say, this tutorial is nowhere near as good as the impact site. Don't get me wrong, it checks off all the boxes for learning the controls and teaches you how to play the game. That part is done just fine. Hell, you could argue it does a better job than Pikmin 1 because it teaches you basic combat, something the impact site does not do. However, it also kinda misses one key thing that the first game does that bogs the start of the second down big time. It's 2 days. The first day in the Valley of Repose teaches you about your controls, collecting treasures, and how to use the captains independently to accomplish tasks, while the second day teaches you combat in caves. I can sort of see an argument that it would cause the first day to be very long if these were combined, but at the same time, cutting your tutorial halfway through just to be forced into picking it back up the next day makes the beginning of the playthrough drag a bit, and it's something I'm not a fan of. Man, Hyder, I forgot it started like this. I mean, this just feels kinda sloppy compared to the first game. By the way, has he checked back in, like, at all since I started? No? Where the hell is he? Well, whatever. Once you clear the prologue, it's time to begin playing in earnest. Much like the first game, Pikmin 2 is a strategy game all about collecting things as efficiently as possible with the limited time you have each day. The overworld gameplay loop isn't changed particularly much in comparison to the first. Beat up enemies to grow more Pikmin and clear a path to base, build shortcuts to cut down on travel times, and get those trinkets back to the ship. This aspect is still a blast for me, and to make it even more exciting, we have new enemy types as early as our first day in the Awakening Wood. Creeping chrysanthemums and cloaking burrownits join the ranks of bulborbs in order to make your job a little harder, what with their big health bars and protective shielding. But with the might of our reds and purples, we can overcome a lot of what they have to throw at us. And thank goodness we can, because we're gonna have to hurry if we want to get enough treasures before the time limit's up. Oh wait, this is one of Pikmin 2's first big sticking points for some. There's no day limit. Okay, well there technically is, but none of us will live to see day 4 billion of a real Pikmin 2 playthrough, so I'm not counting it. I've expressed previously that I feel like the time limits in Pikmin 1 and 3 don't really feel threatening to me, and because of that I can take or leave them. Having replayed 2 now, I half agree with myself. Without giving away too much yet, Pikmin 2 has what is essentially 2 halves to the campaign, which I'll dub the story and free play modes. The free play half really doesn't need one, it's purely a 100% completion task that does have an end goal, but it's very different from the first half of the adventure. However, during the time that the goal is collecting enough money to stave off foreclosure in what should be an urgent matter, and I can just not do that forever? I seriously question how good these loan sharks even are at recouping costs. I think slapping a 30-day time limit onto getting 10,000 Pokos would make a lot of sense to make sure you're getting consistent progress towards the goal while not being overbearing, and then retracting once the free play section hits to allow players all the time they need for the more challenging caves down the road. In the end, I still don't find this particularly necessary, but it would definitely feel more logical to start with one at least. While exploring the first cave of the Awakening Wood, we got our hands on the other new Pikmin type for this expedition, White Pikmin. These little guys are fast, have powerful eyes that allow them to dig up hidden treasures, and are immune to poison, a new hazard type for the adventure. I don't love them quite as much as I do purples, but they're a really great addition to the roster and open up a lot of level design possibilities that wouldn't have been available otherwise. And you know, couple goals. They also round out our facial feature compendium for the different species of Pikmin. Good luck to the next guys. They're gonna need a mustache or something to stand out. In time, you'll come across yellows again, who are both improved and downgraded from Pikmin 1. You see, they retained their throw height and average attack power, but gained an incredible boon in the form of an immunity to electricity, an insta-kill hazard to every other type. This is huge, as you'll see a lot of electricity in caves as you continue onwards, so yellows will be crucial to protect the rest of the army. However, they did lose access to their other primary skill, as they can no longer hold bomb rocks. In fact, usable bomb rocks are entirely absent from Pikmin 2. I can't say I fully understand their omission, but perhaps with the emphasis on the caves and their claustrophobic nature, they feared implementing them and seeing your battalion explode from friendly fire would upset players. Even still, I find yellows a massive step up from the original. While bomb rocks were necessary for a fair few treasures, their lack of elemental immunity made them generally less worthwhile when just patrolling areas. Whereas in 2, the abundance of electric enemies and hazards made them something I greatly value as I explore. After getting yellows, we can return to the Awakening Wood to reunite with the last type of the game, blues. No real changes to how they operate, they're still your aquatic warriors, which is frankly good enough to warrant always having some on hand. The biggest change for blue Pikmin is actually an enemy variety, as now some beasts can cause other Pikmin types to start drowning on land, which of course blues are immune to. These aren't particularly common or threatening though, so they're more so just continuing to be the helpful support of the workforce, able to traverse just about anywhere to bring treasures back as long as the path is cleared for them. Not much needed changing, and as such they didn't screw with a good thing. No notes here. To touch back on these guys, there's my favorite of the lot, purples. A lot of people will tell you Pikmin 2's purple Pikmin are the best individual type in the entire series, and they're absolutely correct. It is ridiculous how good purples are for everything that isn't wiping out hazards. Their raw strength makes them not just the ideal creatures for getting heavier items moving, but that girth and tonnage also makes them insane for combat. Not only do they dish out the most damage of any types, but if you aim your throw just right, they can also use their weight to stun the enemy for a brief period, and if you have enough purples, you can just keep chucking them at an enemy, freeze them in place, and watch that health bar melt. They're silly little fatties that also have the potency of a nuclear bomb. And they're purple. What's not to love? And of course I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Bulbmin. These guys are exclusive to certain caves and first have to be recruited by beating up the bigger Bulbmin that's leading them around. Once you have them, they follow you until the end of the cave you're in, but they're unable to jump and return with you to the surface. However, these guys make up for it by being objectively better than the rest. These guys are immune to every element, meaning that they can take on literally every task in the entire game and they look like this. There's a reason that Bulbmin are so beloved by the fanbase of this series. They're the most charming of the lot, and while it always saddens me to leave them behind, I'll always be grateful for their aid. I love you, Bulbmin. The variety in Pikmin 2 really is great. All four main types really get to shine in their own way this time that I really felt the first could occasionally struggle with. There's definitely never a question of if one type is outclassed by the others, and it's great stuff. 5 main types? I don't think Bulbmin really counts. Red Pikmin. Red Pikmin don't exist in this game, silly. Okay, so Reds, man, what happened here? Reds are much like Blues in that they didn't change much from the first game. They're still immune to fire, and they still do 1.5 times the damage of other types. But where that strength propelled them to great heights in a game where the other two options did less, in Pikmin 2, purples do even more damage and body most enemies with a stun attack. That leaves their greatest utility to be clearing out fire hazards, but that also isn't super amazing, unfortunately. Unlike other hazards that are essentially impossible to clear out without their specific type, fire geysers are shockingly easy to dispose of with non-reds. This leaves reds in a really weird spot where their biggest utility is to beat one species of fiery bullblacks that shows up quite often, and to somewhat more easily clear out fire traps. Reds were somehow neutered by having absolutely nothing done to them, and it's almost kind of impressive if it weren't so sad. Although even having said all that, it's still always better to have some on hand just in case, as they are still better for combat if you run through all your purples, and there's enough fire that it's a big time save to let them handle it instead of babysitting another type that'll just keep catching a blaze. So while they aren't the kings of the castle this go around, I still wouldn't ditch them. And that's the biggest takeaway from this section, and probably one of the best compliments I can give to Pikmin 2. Each color of Pikmin still feels valuable. There's always another treasure, enemy, or cave where there's gonna be a moment you need to rely on an attribute the other varieties don't have, and they get to show off what makes them special. Despite my bemoaning of reds here, there's never a moment where I would consider shelving them like yellows in the first game, and I really appreciate that about the design of Pikmin 2. With every type on hand, we can also start discussing the areas of this game in more detail. This time each area takes on a seasonal theme, which is apparent as early as the Valley of Repose. This tundra is where you start the adventure, but beyond that it is a pretty decent blend of challenges. Much like the impact site in Pikmin 1, you shouldn't be coming back here until you have every Pikmin type, but unlike the impact site, this is a full-size location. Scaling an arrow hill to take out this armored cannon beetle and having to escort reds across a pond to beat up fiery bullblacks are definitely the above-ground highlights of this expedition from a gameplay level, but I also just love being in this place. I'm a sucker for snow levels, and all the cute extra details like the silly snowman, the manhole covering your base, and Louis' imprint in the snow from where he landed help to really paint a scene for the player of how cozy this area is. The Awakening Wood is your spring stage and also very well put together. It feels more compact than the Valley of Repose, but that density does wonders for the challenges of the area. As mentioned before, the enemy variety is really nice and you can rack up huge bucks in a single day here without any trouble. It's immensely satisfying. These woods also feature the first instance of berries. These things allow you to make 2 different types of sprays that will give you temporary aid in battle, and the game wastes no time in providing you with at least the red ultra spicy kind, which improves your Pikmin's speed and DPS for a short time. It's really smart to implement it this early and have the spawn for them right next to base, because it gives new players a temporary boost if things get hazy, and veterans access to a tool that allows for massive speed boosts. There's also the ultra bitter spray that freezes enemies in place, which I find myself mostly using during boss fights, but it's always super helpful in a pinch. The summery perplexing pool, as its name suggests, is the primary water level of the game. Water abounds in this area, and the types of challenges this presents are very fun. Combat with the underwater toady Bloister to retrieve a treasure, another valuable buried beneath a puddle that requires you to figure out how to drain the place. There's even a fun puzzle with seesaw blocks to get a captain on a ledge in order to move another item. This area also has my absolute favorite collection of caves in the game, all of them bringing a unique spice to their individual journeys that helps them all really stand out. This place is also gorgeous. It's genuinely insane how nice the water looks here for a GameCube game. I'd swim around here all day if the game let me. Truly, the perplexing pool might be my favorite map in the whole game. I love it that much. These three areas are what make up the bulk of Pikmin 2's adventure, and I don't think there's a bad one among the lineup. They're all visually appealing, have fun tasks, and feel so distinct that it makes it a blast to explore every time I replay this game. That being said, you noticed it already, didn't you? The Awakening Wood, the Perplexing Pool. These areas may be distinct among Pikmin 2's bunch, but you can definitely see a lot of the DNA from the Forest of Hope and the Distant Spring in those two respectively. It's clear that they started by taking these stages and then modified chunks to repurpose them into new concepts, and as such, at times it can feel like you're playing remixed versions of the first Pikmin stages, because frankly you are. And even more unfortunately, you can sometimes feel the lack of thought that went into the decision to recycle these stages. For example, as much as I love the Perplexing Pool, notice this spot here. There's a bridge that you need to build with blues to then get across with yellows so you can throw them over this wall to bust down an electric gate and retrieve the treasure. Except, no, you don't, not even a little bit really, because you can very easily knock it down from the other side and keep your yellows alive just fine. This segment exists in Pikmin 1, but it actually has a ship part, so it makes sense to have it. And 2, there's almost no incentive to building this bridge. It's not super frequent, but those moments it pops up are just funky. There's also a distinct lack of bosses in the overworld this time. They weren't particularly hard in Pikmin 1 usually, but now the only one you'll come across is the burrowing Snagrit, which has frankly been downgraded to mini-boss. Poor guy. That all being said though, even if the areas are remixed and have their hiccups, I think I like them as a whole more than the originals. I tried to put it into words, but it's not exactly rocket science for me. I just have a bit more fun with these stages than the last games. Part of me even likes those awkward nothing spots, because in a series built on efficiency, having places that serve as time wasters actually makes sense in a way. I also love that the Valley of Repose is wholly unique instead of being a redo of the Forest Navel like the other two, because let me tell ya, I much prefer the Winter Wonderland to that crusty cavern. While it's a bit of a bummer there aren't more unique stages here, these still do a great job of carrying on where the first game left off. The time spent above ground is still the same excellent Pikmin flavor I'm looking for, and that's more than good enough for me. But of course, I don't think most people are going to argue that the above ground sections are bad in this game. When it comes to Pikmin 2, the controversy isn't about what's above, it's what's below. I've been rather sly about sneaking around the discussion of caves so far because this is Pikmin 2's defining attribute, for better and for worse. You can't get the 10,000 Pokos necessary to beat the game by staying above ground. You must interact with these, and for some people, these are the worst aspect in the entire series. They're often considered aggravating and antagonizing to the player, where RNG determines your enjoyment more than your own skill. This has gotta be why Loupus forced me to play this game, because these are considered so torturous by some that it makes Pikmin 2 the worst game in the series. And for me, I absolutely hate— Is he back yet? Ah, f*** it. I love caves. For a long time, I didn't even know these were contentious. Certainly I'm not the only one who likes these dungeons, but if you look online, you're going to see a lot of negative takes that caves are poorly randomly generated and out to bully the player. And frankly, for the most part, I don't see it. To recap real quick, caves are dungeons where you traverse a set number of floors to collect treasures, kill enemies, and get down to the next floor. Usually at the end of dungeons, you'll fight a boss who will drop a permanent upgrade for Olimar and Louis, such as elemental immunities or a more powerful whistle. These caves combine the strategic beauty that is Pikmin gameplay with that of a dungeon crawler. The rewards are great for delving further in, but one wrong move and your run could be in dire straits before you know it. To this point, I've brushed these aside and described Pikmin 2 in a way that makes it sound much more similar to the first game than it truly is. While certainly you're going to want to engage with the more Pikmin 1 style of overworlds, caves are where you spend the biggest chunk of your time. This isn't something everyone is going to love, and that part I can and will acknowledge. It's a big shift in focus, and if you're not down for the more claustrophobic, combat-centric challenge these present, I suppose I can't blame you. It's ironic to me that in the same interview I found that discussed Pikmin 2's development starting immediately after the first, Shigefumi Hino also expressed a desire to have Pikmin 2 feel much more laid back than the original. Because truly, the second you go beneath the surface, it's anything but. Often you'll need to be on your toes at all times to keep your Pikmin from dying to whatever manner of beasts lie below, and if that sounds too stressful for you, then yeah, you probably will grow to dislike this game. For me though, I really love the structure of caves. Every floor is a bite-sized challenge that requires you to think ahead to sustain as few casualties as possible, but very rarely does the game put you in situations where you have to immediately spring into action. That can happen due to the way that the floors are randomly generated, but I can only recall it happening a few times in my playthrough, and none were particularly overbearing. More often, I was able to take things at my own pace and keep things under control because of it. I also really appreciate the variety of the caves themselves. Upon inspecting each cave, it'll give you its name and the type of elemental hazards to expect inside, and the game goes to great efforts to make sure each cave stands out. As I've alluded to several times at this point, the level design is randomly generated. However, it's not pure randomization. Certain caves will stick to certain themes, like the shower room going all in on subfloors that resemble, well, take a guess. And the subterranean complex going heavy on machinery as you get further in. Even if no two visits are identical in their exact structure, the enemy types, hazards, and treasures stay consistent, so you'll always have a general idea of what to expect per subfloor. The theming can also extend to the type of challenges present in the dungeon. The Awakening Woods, Bulblack's Kingdom is a great simple example of this, as the dungeon obviously has an emphasis on bulborb type enemies, and after tackling the whole thing, you're met with, oh god, no, not again. Nah, just kidding. Emperor Bulblax is a joke this time, but it does tie the whole cave together as the bulborb one. My personal favorite dungeon is the Glutton's Kitchen, which takes place in this living room void that, doesn't make much sense when you think about it, but it puts that aesthetic to great effect by hiding treasures inside toy boxes, fighting bread bugs for items atop a toy train set, and culminating in a fight with the even sillier giant bread bug to collect all the food before it and its lackeys take their meal back to their holes. This kitchen is tightly composed, and the use of bread bugs as the big bad gives this cave a completely unique atmosphere, being more of a race to collect everything first instead of a combat arena. It's such a one-of-a-kind environment across the caves, but most of them stand out in their own ways that really help make each one feel exciting to enter. Man, that food in the Glutton's Kitchen looks so good. When we get out of this, is there any dinner left over? God, I can't wait to go home. Keep an eye out for Loupus so I know when to pretend to be miserable, alright? I really can't understand why he just disappeared like that, though. This is also where I think that having two captains really starts to shine. I've barely touched on it to this point, because while it's certainly nice to have two captains in the main stages, the caves definitely feel more strongly designed to take advantage of this feature. With the press of a button, you can switch between Olimar and Louie to take control of Pikmin individually to complete one set of tasks while the other captain takes care of something else. When you have a subfloor split off into multiple directions, it feels great to divvy up responsibilities and send each off to complete their goals without having to backtrack. If I had anything to gripe about with this though, it's that you can't automate one captain's path while you're in control of another. This is something that changes in Pikmin 3, but coming back to 2 and having to fully take care of putting both captains where they need to be isn't as smooth as I'd like. Not super annoying, but plenty of strategy games by this point normalize that sort of feature. I wish it was here too. But then again, maybe they didn't want you to feel the horror of a captain careening straight into a nuclear missile. Time to rip that band-aid off. Some of these caves are designed to absolutely beat the hell out of you and your army. And I'm not just saying this in the sense that enemies can be tough, because of course they can be. I mean that sometimes things will just happen out of nowhere on a subfloor to purposefully throw a wrench in your plans. Bomb rocks may be gone from your arsenal, but the game can just drop them out of the sky and send your squad to Kingdom Come at a moment's notice, along with boulders and eggs that may contain an enemy that causes your Pikmin to scatter in fear. These random surprise elements can kick your ass, and the game is notorious for this. However, in replaying the game, either my playthrough was incredibly generous or the game's supposed bullshit RNG is kinda overstated. I feel like the game gets painted as chucking these things at you from the very start, which just isn't the case. It takes a while before you start seeing bomb rocks and other hazards fall from the sky, and even then the frequency is actually still somewhat uncommon. I can't recall many moments where I was truly hosed into sacrificing Pikmin during this part of the adventure, and even then, it didn't start early in the playthrough. The caves where this did happen were often marked as being more difficult, and how do I know that? By the hazard count. While the caves are able to be done in a non-linear order, it's pretty clear that these places have a difficulty progression that can sort of be represented with these hazards. For example, none of the Awakening Woods caves have every hazard, and as such, none of them will go insane with dropping death all over your party. Meanwhile, the likes of Frontier Cavern and the Submerged Castle, you know the one. are clearly designed to be more difficult by incorporating every element, and as such will quite literally throw much more at the player. It's just another aspect of the game's challenge. In your journey to pay off your company's debt, it's used sparingly enough that if you utterly despise it, you can mostly avoid the caves where this is a real problem by just not going into the ones that are furthest from base, as they're always the hardest designed one per area. That being said, no, I'm not going to defend them on a this is actually fun level. Having half your Pikmin explode because a bomb spider dropped down at an inopportune time sucks, especially because there's rarely a way to recuperate Pikmin during cave runs. However, I actually have a foolproof workaround that helps you preserve your Pikmin and get through these harder caves much more comfortably. It's something that's present as an option in both Pikmin 1 and 3, but I didn't mention it before now because I think this technique is really at its most handy in caves. You ready to hear what it is? Here it comes! In between every subfloor, Pikmin 2 will save your game. This is of course partially due to the fact that caves are usually kinda lengthy and happen during the day, so it's kinda necessary to allow people with less free time to actually be able to progress. However, being able to restart a floor if you're hemorrhaging Pikmin is also a benefit to this. And while you may argue that this is cheesy and that it isn't something the game intends, I must point out that every other mainline game has its own version of this. If you're screwing up severely in 1 or 3, you can hit pause and return to the start of the day, no questions asked. The only real difference here is that it's for one consolidated floor instead of having to do the entire day from the beginning. If you don't want to continue exploring after losing 60 Pikmin in one surprise attack, you don't have to. I can definitely understand the argument that just because you can do this to circumvent these annoying moments doesn't make it better when it happens, though. For some, this is nothing more than slapping a band-aid on a bullet wound, and I can understand why they'd rather have it just not be a problem in the first place. But I really wanted to make a point that the infamous randomness you hear about this game is not as arduous as you may be led to believe, both in terms of frequency and severity. Boy, I've rambled on a long time, haven't I? So long, in fact, that I've hit that 10,000 Poco total and have beaten the game. Talk about a success, Olimar can finally go home to see his wife and kids. What? Anyways, Olimar begins his journey home, fat stacks in hand, ending Pikmin 2. Wait a minute, where's Louie? Aw, man, that's gonna be a lot of paperwork. Well, at this point, we are technically finished. The credits have rolled, we got a result screen, but unlike the first game, we can continue after reaching our goal. This is the beginning of what I dubbed earlier as the free play section of Pikmin 2, because while we do still have a goal, finding Louie of course, it's more accurate to say that we're going back to collect all the treasure we haven't seen yet, as well as explore the new postgame area, the Wistful Wilds. But we do have a problem. Our coworker's kinda stranded, so are we doing this solo? Oh, good. We got Shacho on our hands now, which doesn't change much because he plays the exact same as Louie and Olimar, but if I'm being real, I think he may be my favorite captain just because he's so incompetent. To put it into perspective, at the end of every day, you can get an email from someone back in Hokatade. Before you pay off the debts, you get to experience Shacho's rapid decline to poverty, realizing that he in fact took on a loan from all-devouring black hole loan sharks instead of a safe lender, and ends up living under a bridge as he waits for your return. This same guy has now decided to follow you to a dangerous far-off planet, and instead of a whistle, the guy uses a car horn to recall Pikmin. He's just so dopey. I love Shacho. Louie is also wonderful. I didn't touch on him nearly enough earlier, but he's far more of a mystery compared to our other captains. Seemed a little quiet, hungry, little absent-minded, and now he's lost. Weird guy. He's bug out of his head a lot. Alright, let's get cracking. First things first, I'm gonna check back to the last few caves of the first 3 areas, and while I do, it's finally time for me to talk about that soundtrack. Hajime Wakai is back to bless my eardrums, and bless them he does. I somehow didn't mention this when talking about Pikmin 1, but the soundtracks of these games are dynamic, with certain instruments coming in and out depending on what you're doing. Combat, collecting items, the day coming to the end, all manner of things change how the tune plays. I love it. And on top of that, Olimar and the other captains also get their own separate arrangements of the tracks. Olimar's versions are generally stoic, collected, and recognize that he's far more familiar with the world he's in. While when playing as Louie and the President, the song is a little more clumsy, off rhythm. It really shows how out of element they are without a single word of dialogue. It's insanely good work by Mr. Wakai. There's also way more track variety this time. Not above ground, that's more similar to the first game, but underground, each zone has a few different tracks to choose from. And again, each of these tracks has so many different variations because of the captains and the predicaments they're in that it never gets monotonous while playing. Hell, even the tracks you would never think of are insane in this game. You're listening to the options menu song right now. Hajime Wakai popped off on the options menu. That's how damn good everything is. This collection of songs is my absolute favorite outing in the entire series, and one of the best aspects of the entire game. And of course, when the day ends, we're still treated to this beauty. Also, I gotta bring it up now that we're tallying up our wins. The treasures of Pikmin 2 were such a good part of the game. In lieu of ship parts are over 200 different collectibles, which may sound daunting in comparison to just 30 pieces from Pikmin 1, but it's really not that bad. Each one gets a silly name from the ship and gets your Poco total ever higher. Once you hit the 10,000 mark, there's not much purpose to these necessarily, but you still want to collect them just to see what the hell you're getting next. Like, Clever Girl baking powder. A&W bottle caps? Classic pickles? I love pickles. Wait, why am I getting advertised to? That's right, a lot of these items are also product placements, which allows me to finally stop referring to this place as the planet and admit what it actually has been this whole time. Earth. And not just Earth, but Earth in a post-apocalyptic state. Nintendo's favorite set piece for some reason. I don't know how this has happened 3 times, but at least I get to see the majesty of a Duracell battery because of it. In a lot of other games, I would find this lame, but I don't know, man, it kinda works for me here. Seeing these tiny guys stumble onto a container of shoe polish and calling it an alien billboard is just funny. The Switch version actually retextures all of these to be generic, made-up brands, and I think it's kind of a bummer. Although obviously nothing that serious. Of course, the real sin is changing the arboreal frippery treasure to be red because it was very obviously weed. We all know Olimar smoked pot, Nintendo, you're not slick. Well, Hyder, I'm almost done with this, and then we should be able to get out of here. I'm sorry that I got you wrapped up in these holiday hijinks, but if I had to be stuck with anyone in a spaceship on Pikmas Eve, I'm glad it was you. We got everything else, one last zone to explore. And when we're done with that, Loupus should set us free. You know, assuming he comes back. You don't think he's gonna forget, right? The Wistful Wild, as I said before, unlocks as soon as you hit that 10,000 Poco mark. This place is much like the Awakening Wood and Perplexing Pool in that it's a remix, however this place is actually a mashup of the Final Trial and the Impact Site. I think this one actually does tend to hide it a bit better than the other two due to being a combination of these two maps and the autumn aesthetic. I really like this place. The enemy variety is fun, the challenges are interesting, it has the Doomsday apparatus that requires 100 purple Pikmin. It's a good last challenge before you get tossed into the final 3 caves of the game. And how are those caves? So, you know that thing I said earlier that the randomness isn't actually that bad? The Cavern of Chaos blows. Jesus. Bomb rocks, boulders, enemy spam, it doesn't end. It's floor after floor of the worst the game has to offer and embodies everything that people revile about the caves. The only saving grace being the boss fight with the segmented Crobster. Its rolling attacks and temper tantrum claw makes it pretty unique amongst the roster. But as enjoyable as it is, it can't save what is otherwise a heinous first dungeon in the area. The Hole of Heroes is up next and it's sort of a boss rush. As a concept, I'm not usually in love with these, but keeping your numbers up while pushing further and further through actually is a pretty enjoyable time, at least in comparison to this garbage. And then there's the final dungeon of the game, the Dream Den. This dungeon isn't quite the longest in the game, but it contains the most treasures and some of the most interesting subfloor layouts you'll see throughout the whole journey. It'll put every skill you have to the test, and after 2 caves that were abysmal and just okay, the Dream Den comes out on top in a big way by just being a genuinely great final dungeon. This all culminates on the last floor, where we finally find Louie sleeping on a pile of rubble. Hey Louie, wake up buddy, we gotta get out of here. Oh, okay, bye. The Titan Dweevil is the final boss of Pikmin 2. This big-ass spider has 4 different weapons you have to knock off one by one to begin to damage the Dweevil proper. All the while, it'll be trying to massacre your squad with elemental attacks that cover a huge part of the floor, meaning that all the while you have to stay on top of keeping everyone from dying to attacks that they're not immune to. Having said all that, you probably have noticed that I'm using a lot of yellows in this footage when I had a pretty well-balanced group coming in here, and there is a reason for that. This fight is much easier with yellows. A well-balanced group does mean you can probably take the boss down faster, however due to electricity being an insta-kill in Pikmin 2, it is objectively more dangerous than the rest of the Titan Dweevil's attacks, which you can otherwise easily whistle to prevent any major losses. So if you run through the dungeon once with all of the types to collect the treasure, leave, and then come back with a ton of yellows, the fight becomes much less nerve-wracking. The fight also does lack the threat of any random events, it's purely an expression of your skill against this Goliath bug. It may be a tad too easy, even if you don't go get a bunch of yellows, but I'll take it any day over the Emperor Bullblacks from last game. However, we're still not at the peak of Pikmin final bosses yet, just you wait. The Titan explodes into a pile of goo and Louie falls to the ground fast asleep. We collect the last few treasures and top it off with Louie, the King of Bugs? That's an odd title. But hey, whatever, we've gotten everything we came back to this funky planet for, it's time to go home. This ending is another sweet one. Shacho being so excited about the adventure he just went on, Olimar trailing along the surface of the planet as he takes one last look at his home away from home. The Pikmin once again showing their thanks for the man as the onions light up one by what the hell, that's orange again! I'm not colorblind, that's not red. Who are you, you orange mysteries? At any rate, we're off once again, back to Hokitate to finally rest. Ending Pikmin 2, for real. Oh, thank God I did it! Let's get these chains off and... ah, damn it, Loupus does have to let us out of these. Okay, well, in the meantime, wanna look at some extras? In comparison to the first game, Pikmin 2 has a lot more going on besides the main story for players to enjoy. For starters, on the stage select menu, you'll notice options to go inspect the enemies and treasures you've come across along the way. This is the Piklopedia, and these are amazing additions to the game. As you may recall, at the end of Pikmin 1, you do get a roll call of the enemies in the game with bits of trivia sprinkled in. The Piklopedia is more of the same, but it's also where you get to hear all of Olimar's thoughts on, well, everything really. The locations you visit, the wildlife, and how it functions, his experiences with his coworkers, Olimar catalogs it all, complete with his sweet naivete. You could spend hours reading through all of these. They're all great reads, although it does make me miss his commentary being sprinkled throughout the game like it is in the first. I am happy it's at least retained in some capacity, and that there's this much to boot. Later on, you'll also unlock extras in the Piklopedia with the ship's sales pitch for each treasure, and on the monster side, a cookbook from Louie. He's serious about his work, having a recipe for nearly every enemy in the entire game to present to the player. Did he seriously eat all of these things while I was gone for a week? And for that matter, it's implied by inspecting the King of Bugs that he was probably in control of the Titan Dweevil? I'm not so sure that getting Louie back was a good idea. The challenge mode makes a return from Pikmin 1, but whereas in the original I didn't care for it, here I think it's a blast. You're spawned into brand new caves and tasked with collecting as much as possible with the given Pikmin, sprays, and time allotted to you, all while continuing further and further down and eventually leaving in order to get the best score possible. You also get rewarded extra for completing each challenge without losing any Pikmin, denoted by a pink flower. This mode is genuinely fantastic, and it feels so much better designed than the first games. If I weren't trying to get out of here, I'd love to try to rack up as many high scores as I can, it's just that fun. Completing all of them with a pink flower also gives you access to a secret cutscene that reveals the space bunny that put Hokitate Freight into debt didn't exist at all. No, Louie actually just ate all of the carrots that he was transporting and ended up causing this entire mess. Yeah, okay, let's talk about Louie. My descriptions of him to this point have been somewhat vague, and that was entirely on purpose, because for much of this game, he is a complete wild card. You don't get much out of him during the time he's playable, and then he goes missing, and by the time that you find him, he's become a tyrannical menace to the creatures of the planet, without using any Pikmin to help him. I've seen some people refer to him as the definition of evil, however I don't think that's a fair characterization for him. He's unbelievably selfish for sure, but based on the information we have, he's not evil incarnate. Louie is more thematically resonant with the general depiction of Pikmin 2. He's a chaotic wildcard. Louis has two interests in his life, cooking and bugs, and also clearly has much higher ambitions than to work for Hocotate Freight. He expresses this in his cookbook, mentioning his desire to sell an iridescent glint beetle to start a cooking show. For Louis, this job is just a way to make ends meet. There's nothing he's passionate about here. Besides eating the product, of course, which does end up tailspinning him into an entirely different planet. And when Olimar abandons him on accident, leaving him to figure out how to survive alone on an alien planet full of the bugs he loves, what does he do? He takes full advantage of it, chowing down on everything in sight and seemingly conquering the wildlife. After all, we never see him use the onions or Pikmin again during the credits or the final boss, and given that he was drooling looking at a red one in the tutorial, he probably tried to eat them, which in turn made them avoid him. Understandably so, but at that point, what else is there for Louis to do but tame the most powerful bug he can find so he can use it to get more food? And certainly while he's domesticated the Titan Dweevil and controls it, Louis is not conscious at the time that you fight it. Louis is not attacking his coworkers out of hatred. The Dweevil's just protecting its owner while he's sleeping, because Louis is powerful enough to get it to heed his commands. Louis is not an evil man. He's just a weirdo who knows how to climb his way to the top of the food chain. He's the king of bugs and the king of chaos. And you know, despite all his shortcomings, I really do love his antics. He's a really good character. He is a weird guy though. He's bug out of his head a lot. Finally, we have two captains. There is a two-player mode here, which I can't show off unfortunately, but let me tell you, it's a great time. You and another person each take control of one captain and compete to get to 4 marbles before the opponent, all while fighting other enemies and collecting marbles to match your captain's color to unleash special attacks on your opponent. It's such an insanely good mode that I only wish I could spend more time on it. Alas, don't have a second Wii remote. And with that, I'm out of things to show off. Pikmin 2 isn't just my favorite game in the series, it's one of my absolute favorite games of all time. I love the stages, the world design, the caves, the music, the Piklopedia, the bosses, the Louis. Everything in this game just clicks for me perfectly. I know that it has its flaws. Its random elements can be off-putting. It lacks some quality of life features that later installments offer that would be really nice here. It has the Cavern of Chaos. You can definitely find problems in this package. But despite that, it's more of that same Pikmin-y goodness that I love from the original, with all sorts of bells and whistles that I truly adore. I would absolutely recommend that you play this game, but maybe give Pikmin 1 a shot first. Despite the time limit, it's a generally more laid-back, less challenging adventure that I think gets your feet wet for what 2 has on display. No matter what though, I hope that I made it clear how much I care about this game. I may be trapped in a spaceship, but I wouldn't talk about something this long if I didn't give a damn about it. But after all this, something's not sitting right with me. I gotta ask, if the goal was to torture us, Loupus didn't do a very good job, did he? I mean, it's a little cold, this chain kinda chafes a little, but I had a lot of fun tonight. Does that make any sense for an evil, all-knowing spirit? God, maybe all this waiting around was the real torture, especially with how damn hungry I am. I wonder if this is what Louis felt like when... Wait a goddamn minute. Louis. Loupus. Huh. At any rate, even if it came at the expense of my Pikmas Eve ending with me trapped in a cell, getting to re-experience another of my all-time favorites this holiday was wonderful. And even better with a friend like you, Hyder. And now we just have to wait for... There you are, Loupus! I get it now! You're not some antithesis of Saint Oliclaus. You're not some Pikmas demon. You're just the spirit of Pikmin chaos. You didn't make me play Pikmin 2 to have a bad time. You weren't mad at us for not having enough Pikmin spirit. Your antics aren't a punishment. It's to remind us just how great this series is. Even when everything is at its most perilous, Pikmin is just fun, it's goofy, it's just a series designed to lay back and have a good time. Sure, initially it's daunting, but when you piece everything together and just execute on a plan, it feels so right. Pikmin spirit doesn't just come from enjoying a Pikmin game. It's remembering why these games are as wonderful as they are in the first place. Thank you, Loupus. I feel like I've learned a lot tonight.
Warning.
I don't think he listened. Oh, God, that hurt. Where am... Well, this isn't what I look like. How did I get here? And why is everything so choppy? Oh, thank God, Duracell, save me. I've got to find Hyder and get out of here. But I can't move anymore. It's just so cold. It's just so cold. Pikmin?